Welcome back. The excitement continues. And now we have Peter Ferrie talking to us about teaching an old Zork new tricks. Take it away.
All right. So, can you port the Infocom interpreter M to ProDOS next? This was... That helps.
I don't think it gets louder.
Maybe I don't get louder. Maybe the microphone will. How about that?
Right.
Okay, so can you port the Infocom interpreter M to ProDOS next? This was how my day started in December, with a question from 4 a.m., possibly 4 a.m. The question he asked, it made me think this could be a huge time sink, but I had to try, and I was keen. This project became On Beyond Z Machine. Originally, 4am just wanted to run Z3 games from ProDOS. And when you start these old games, the first thing they do is ask you if you want to run in 80-column mode or not. But if you already know the answer to that, then there's no need to ask. So we added an option to automatically enable 80 columns, if that was the user's preference, without actually asking. And originally, when you run in 80-column mode, it's always lowercase text that's output. So as a gimmick, we added an option to make it always uppercase. And we added a structure at 300 so that we could keep adding more options as we went along without getting in the way of the interpreter. Here's a screenshot of the Z3 version of Zork 1 running in 80-column uppercase mode. Is it possible to have the interpreter output lowercase in 40 columns? That seems like an obvious question, but for some reason I wasn't expecting it. Anyway, we now have an option to enable lowercase output in 40-column mode. And here's a screenshot of the Z3 version of Zork 1 running in 40-column lowercase mode. It does actually look pretty good. We added a feature to allow saving the game to the hard disk. And we stored in just one file for all the slots instead of having one file per slot, which makes it a little easier to copy it around, and it's no longer tied to the floppy disk. And the save game remembers the last slot that was used by storing the slot that was used in the auxiliary data for the file, so that a front end like Pitch Dark can offer that as a first preference. I spent all night coding the save game part and sent it to 4 a.m., who released the interpreter the next day. He released it as interpreter P. The P stands for ProDOS. I wanted to call it interpreter Q, but no, it's interpreter P. There was no discussion. I wonder if we could auto-restore a save game, because 4am loves his automation. Yes, we can do that too. We have an option to restore a save game as opposed to starting a new game. And we have an option to specify the slot number. It's done by intercepting the keyboard handler because the interpreter polls the keyboard directly, so there's no ROM routines used. And we do this by simulating the user typing the word restore and then typing in the slot number and then pressing Y to confirm the restore. Then we unhook the redirection to allow the user to type normally and actually play the game. Infocom games could print out the game as you went along. It could be create a transcript on the hard drive. Thanks to Kevin Savitz for reminding 4am about that one. But we can do that. We have an option to script to a file. Of course, we can do that automatically. And it's done in the same way as for the auto restore, but we just simulate typing script instead. and it can be combined with the auto restore option. First we do the restore, and then we enable the scripting so that you don't end up with a transcript that begins with the restore text. But wait, there's more. You can also return to ProDOS when you quit. The original interpreters would intentionally hang the system when you quit, requiring a reboot of the system. But now we can just return directly to ProDOS. And the whole thing fits in 386 bytes. When we started this project, there was lots of space and the code was really clean and really easy to follow, nice subroutines, nice layout. But then as time went on, someone kept asking for features. The space got smaller and the code got tighter. And it was still fine until this last feature. The quit to ProDOS was just enough to put me over the limit. And so I had to get creative. Now the code is a mess of overlapping structures, instruction masking, branching to the middle of an instruction. To call it spaghetti would be a compliment, because there are only 389 bytes of space. Lost my connection here.
Battery going in the...
No, it's something else wrong. The wire, I can't figure out what it is yet.
So I have to yell.
Hello.
Maybe what's wrong with it is keep hitting on it.
Try this.
All right. Hot swap.
This has just been making me crazy.
Okay.
Is it making sound?
How about that? Still not.
Well, now it's doing something.
Oh, it could have stereo.
Just talk loud.
All right, I have to yell. All right, so the Z3 interpreter uses a maximum of 47 kilobytes of memory. If there's less memory, it uses less, but if there's 48K, it will use only 47 kilobytes. And it explicitly avoids the BF page, which is perfect for us because it allows ProDOS to stay active in memory. We don't have to do any fancy swapping of the global page. And that other 1 kilobyte is the exact size of the ProDOS file buffer. So we can just call directly into the ProDOS MLI and we have a file access for free. That's how we're able to get it all to fit. And sometime later, I decided to do something really crazy. I had a support for Z5 running from ProDOS. And in case that wasn't enough, they added Z4. And then, 4M acquired the earliest versions of Zork 1 and Zork 2, which of course used the Z1 and Z2 interpreters. So I added those as well. Now we have everything from Z1 to Z5 running from ProDOS. The Z1 and Z2 interpreters are only trivially different from Z3, so it came down to just the patch offsets we had to apply to change for compatibility. So there was no problem at all to do those. And here's a sample of the Z1 version of Zork 1 as I experienced it in 1983 when a friend and I wandered away from our tour group and sat down at the unguarded computers at a nuclear power facility. That's a story for another day, but 35 years later we're still friends and he actually works there now. These days there are guards everywhere and you can't go anywhere without an escort. Anyway, that's unrelated to that. There's a really cool feature that I found while I was hacking the Zork code, and I was so surprised I told 4AM about it, but I wanted to keep it secret so I could do a big reveal right now. The only problem was I forgot to say so at the time. So 4AM promptly showed it to his 30 billion or so followers, and now everyone knows. But here it is. Z1 can do lowercase. The funny thing is that it actually unpacks in lowercase text and then explicitly converts to uppercase before displaying. So with just a little patch to disable that change, we have lowercase output in Z1. And of course, Z2 can do the same thing. The Z4 interpreter uses 62 kilobytes of memory, the other 2K being the monitor ROM. And it uses all 62K, there's no question about that. That leaves no room for ProDOS on a 64K machine because it's not right to require 128K to run a 64K title. So for that we use ProRWTS. And in case you haven't seen it, last week I released the code on my GitHub page to ProRWTS. I'll have the link to my page at the end of the presentation, you can see. Unfortunately, I couldn't find enough space to enable scripting support. That might change in the future if I have time to review it, but for now it doesn't exist. And obviously there's no way to quit to ProDOS because there's no ProDOS to quit to. But the other features are present. We have 40 and 80 column upper and lower case. We have save game support with auto restore. And for this case, to save on code size, we require that the save game exists on disk already, so I don't have to create it. But to save on disk space, we use a sparse format that's only 5 blocks on disk, even though the file size appears to be 140K. And then ProRWTS knows how to write to the sparse file and update the structure on disk, so it does the right thing. You can still copy it away. And the whole thing's only 535 bytes. That space is just simply replacing the RWTS of the original Z4 interpreter. And we came in under the original size, but only just. Here's a sample of a Z4 title that's been launched from ProDOS. This is A Mind Forever Voyaging, one of my favourite titles from Infocom. The Z5 interpreter uses 127 and 3/4 kilobytes of memory out of 128K.
Wow.
The only space left is page 3, and not even all of it, and some other bytes here and there. Obviously there's no room for ProDOS even on a 128K machine in that case. So we use ProRWTS here as well. Again, there's no scripting support, no quit, but the same features as for Z4. And it fits in 536 bytes because they changed the keyboard handling a little bit, and I had to make a change as well. And here's a Z5 title launched from ProDOS. We split the interpreters into individual files based on the version of the support, which reduces the load time and allows you to copy just the individual interpreters for whichever games you want to play. If you're not interested in Z1, Z2, then you don't even need to copy them. We use the actual Infocom code wherever possible because they did such a great job with the interpreter. And really, I didn't understand what they were doing. I couldn't have rewritten it in the time we had available. And with the magic of auxiliary data, we can associate a data file with the interpreter that's needed. So we can specify that a Z5 file needs a Z5 interpreter. And so even if you rename the data file, you can still have an interpreter that can load the file. And that allows us to take advantage of a feature in ProDOS where the BY program, known as Bitsy will run a file called basis system if it exists when a program launch is requested. So we created a basis system that knows how to deal with the .z files being run. It queries the auxiliary data and then locates the proper interpreter, and then it runs it directly. So essentially we've created click to run. Here's a screenshot of my hard disk with some Z files and a directory full of the interpreters. There are 2 Z5 interpreters because the format wasn't particularly stable. We could not find a single interpreter for Z5 that could run all the Z5 games. But we did find 2 of them that could ultimately run them all. So we have different auxiliary data to separate the 2 of them. And here's me clicking on Enchanter, and it simply runs. You don't have to start up the interpreter, specify a game. We just run the data file directly. And there's one more thing. Are the save game files completely opaque? Would it be possible to get the name of the room you were in when you saved? This is probably the most evil question he asked during this entire project, because this part alone took more time than the rest of it combined. We can do it. And only took 2 days to add the Z3 games. It took 2 months to add the first 25 Z4 and Z5 games. Fortunately, I was able to refine the process, got a little bit faster as I went along, because imagine my joy and surprise when 4am said, and now for volume 2. Here's 40 more Z5 games. 10 days before the conference. So, 60 days to add 25 Z4, Z5 games. 10 days to add 40 more games. At the time, I said, I'll find a way. And then I said something else that elicited the response of, you don't seem very enthusiastic about this project. And so I had some stuff going on at the time. I wasn't, just caught me at the wrong moment. But I didn't want to let him down. So I pulled out all stops and added all 40 games in under 1 day. We can automatically fetch the room name and the score and the moves and the time and the date. And now we can also get the blood pressure for bureaucracy, the number of wishes left in Wishbringer, anything else we want to get, and in whichever combination is appropriate for the game. So we have Zork that has score and moves, we have Suspect that has moves and time, we have a Mind Forever Voyaging that has time and date. We can display them in the right way. And it's just a small wrapper around actual Infocom code. And it's in a separate program that Pitch Dark uses to display its resume menu. That's all. Thank you.
Questions?
No, there are questions. Yes, yes.
So you said you only needed like 2 versions of interpreter to run like all Infocom games? Or
2 versions of Z5 to run all the Z5
2
games.
versions of Z5,
But
okay.
there's one for Z1, one for Z2, one for Z3, one
Got
for
it.
Z4.
And then how does it know which one to run? So is it the suffix or?
In the auxiliary data, we have 2 different values. And then the basis system that we created knows to look at these 2 and then pick the appropriate Z5 interpreter.
That's a ProDOS feature.
Yes.
You mean Ox, okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yes, Ken.
If a hobbyist created a new game that used one of the Zork interpreters, would your thing automatically be able to just like do it, or does it only work with your canned set of Infocom games?
No, our interpreter will run just about any Z5 game now. We've tested on a collection. These 40 new games are not Infocom at all. They're community games, just a sort of top list. We tested a variety of other games as well, and they all work without changes. For the save support, it's mostly data-driven. There's a game DAT file that I created. Just put the title of the game and the appropriate variables, indexes, and it will work too. Yes.
So I guess the what's out there? Are the games themselves available?
They will be. Mark will talk more about when that release schedule is going to
Okay,
happen.
so the stuff that's on your website at the moment is just like the technology?
Yes, for now. And I suppose Archive.org and Asimov will receive the actual game archives.
Right. I want to put these two things together and play the games.
Yes, well,
Wait for 10 minutes.
yes. You'll hear all about it in the next one.
Man.
Other questions? Yes?
So, saving games to a slot number makes it hard to figure out what you saved unless you record what number corresponds to what saved game you have. Why don't you save games to file names?
You need Pitch Dark, and you'll see why. It has per slot descriptions based on the room name, the time, the date, score, whatever you're up to. So that's the solution for that, rather than using particular file names. Plus, I didn't have space to specify that. The original Infocom games only had slot numbers, so there's no way to change the interface within the space we had to go further. Anyone else?